Our strong economic growth performance for 2022 proves that our calibrated policies and strategies have helped put us on the path to recovery and on track to achieving our aspiration for an inclusive, prosperous, and resilient society by 2028. Clearly, if not for the relatively high inflation, elevated prices during this period, growth could have been higher by another perhaps 1 to 2 percentage points.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
The Philippine economy ended 2022 with a bang after beating growth targets despite record high inflation. Here's what we know. Full-year gross domestic product clocked in at 7.6%, higher than what analysts forecast and that of the government's target band. The figure also jumped from the 5.7% annual GDP recorded in 2021. This comes on the back of a surprise growth in the fourth quarter at 7.2%.
Industry and services posted stellar performance overall in 2022. The major growth drivers are wholesale and retail trade, motor repair services, manufacturing, and construction. The economic expansion in 2022 comes as a welcome surprise, considering the high cost of commodities. Inflation soared to record high levels last year amid supply chain disruptions, high petroleum prices, and a weak peso.
Here to give us insights on the economic growth for 2022, we have over Zoom University of Asia and Pacific economist Mr. Vic Abola. Good evening. Welcome to the big story, sir.
Good evening, Robbie and Gretchen.
Sir, obviously there's a base effect here, but if we look at the numbers, what are the key takeaways and what does this portend for 2023?
I think that we can expect a good 2023 as well. It will be a little bit slower than this, but because of the situation in the global economy, but it won't be very much lower than that. So I'm quite optimistic about 2023, despite the global headwinds. Precisely because we had 5 records of employment levels in the last 5 months, meaning ending November. Meaning each month was a record. That's pretty good because employment is the basis of spending, right?
Yes. But I talk about spending and, as you mentioned, headwinds. Government economists are noting that this growth rate came despite record inflation in 2022. We still have that high inflation as we start the year. How can we sustain this, and can we sustain this if the inflation rate does not get tamed soon?
I believe that the inflation is going to, has already peaked and it's going to start going down in January and reach the BSP's target ceiling, at least that ceiling. It will breach it by the fourth quarter of the year, October particular.
Okay, sir,
yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so and what's driving it? It's jobs, because if you have a job and you have OFWs coming in with depreciated peso, that offsets a little bit, quite a bit, the negative effect of inflation on consumer spending. You don't really care so much if there's higher prices, but if you have a job before you didn't have, well, that's really puts you into a position of spending.
Okay, would you attribute this GDP growth to revenge spending? In the last quarter of the year, we also had the elections. And what does that say about the ability to spend by consumers? Meron po bang pera talaga ang mga Pinoy?
I think there is really the revenge spending that we're seeing, because we can note that the biggest increases occurred in terms of the consumer spending occurred in the restaurants and accommodations. So you have about 25% growth there. And then also in recreation and culture, which is 19, around 19%. So that's from the demand side. Even from the production side, when you look at services, it's really accommodation and restaurants and in food services that grew by in the fourth quarter it grew by 36%. And then you have also the transport and communication with now you can fly. Move around, so that also went up by a double digit to more than 15%. So yes, there's a lot of revenge spending. As you ask if there's going to continue, well, the economy is just really opening up. It's still not full blast, right? Mm-hmm. I think you can observe that a lot of people are still a bit hesitant in going to the office or even going to school. Although it's already supposed to be face to face, but parents are a little bit worried. So there's still a lot of way to go, and I think that at the pace that we're growing, we may be able to hit our growth path that was established in the previous decade by 2024, which would be earlier than what expected by the former NEDA chief.
You mentioned some of the sectors that were drivers of this growth in 2022. Is there, as we get into 2023 and build momentum, are you expecting any other particular sectors who may be laggards but that you expect to kick in 2023?
It's really, I would say, other business services where you have also professional services, because as businesses grow or reopen, there will be more opportunities for those. There's no let-up in BPOs, for example, because as I was talking to the biggest BPO company, they are at 100,000 employed, and they're hiring more. So the growth drivers are there. I think that there will be, more on the infrastructure side. It was not very, that elevated in 2022. It was good, but it was not that, I would say, extraordinary. So that's one. The other would be in the area of power, energy, water, the basic things, because actually that's what we need, and it's very much in short supply. And I think the PSA, the amendment of the Public Service Act it's going to be attract foreign investors into areas that were previously considered as public utilities, which restricted ownership to minority, right?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. That was UANP economist Vic Abola. Now here's another moving up story. Filipinos are gaining more recognition not only in the international stage but also in outer space. Proof of that is a physics student from UP Los Baños whose experiment could help in future space explorations. Mobile journalist Francis Orsio gives us a front seat to the story.
Out of over 200 experiment proposals received by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency or JAXA for the Asian Tri-Zero-G 2022 competition, only 6 entries were chosen to be performed inside the International Space Station. Making it to the list is the microgravity experiment proposed by UP Los Baños applied physics student William Abran. Abran's experiment is called rotation of dumbbell-shaped objects in space. But what exactly is it about?
Tinetest lang namin or ino-observe lang namin kung magiging stable ba yung rotation ng ganitong shape, yung tinatawag kong dumbbell shape. Kasi pagdating sa space, may mga hugis na kapag pinaikot sa specific na direksyon, bigla silang bumabaliktad o nag-flip ng rotation ng hindi ginagalaw. So, it's just nice to observe lang din and confirm kung tama ba yung expectation natin sa mga ganitong shape.
The experiment was successfully performed last week, not by Abran, but by astronaut Koichi Wakata inside the Japanese experimental module Kibo. Though the proposal sounds and looks simple, this experiment could actually be helpful in future space explorations.
Pwede rin ito magamit as concept ng mga future designers pagdating sa spacecraft designing, kumbaga.
Aside from spacecraft design, the Philippine Space Agency says this test could also offer a real-life example affirming the validity of Newton's laws of motion and Ehrenfest's theorem in microgravity. With the success of the experiment, Abran hopes that similar research in the country will receive more support. He believes Filipino scientists have all the potential to keep up with the space research and development of other nations.
So yeah, I hope more people support yung mga ganitong uri ng gawain, lalo na sa research. Kasi sa huli, ang mag-benefit naman dito ay yung society natin.
Mobile journalist Francis Orsho, We Are One News.
After the break, the search for the missing Cessna 206 plane in Isabela continues. We'll get the details on day 2 of search and rescue operations. When the big story returns, keep it here on One News. You're watching The Big Story here on One News. It's day 2 of search and rescue operations for the missing Cessna 206 light plane in Isabela. Though authorities already have a lead on its location, thick clouds and intermittent rains are preventing the Philippine Air Force from conducting an aerial search. Recall that the plane went missing Tuesday afternoon, a few minutes after departing the Kawayan City Airport for Maconacon with 6 people on board. Now, according to Isabela's incident management team, a family member of one of the passengers tried to call their cell phone With this, they found out that the phone is within 20-kilometer radius of a cell site in Maconacon. With the aerial search put on hold, soldiers and police personnel scoured the mountains of Maconacon as well as its neighboring municipality of Divilacan. The Civil Aviation Authority also continues its investigation into the incident.
During the flight time, yun po na hindi natin na masasabi because yun nga po, easterlies dyan, minsan nakakaroon ng crosswind kaya hindi natin ma-speculate. Depende na ho yan doon sa piloto dahil ma-experience yung mga piloto yan dyan sa specific na lugar yan kaya alam nila kung saan sila dadaan.
Have you been having a hard time booking a ride lately? Well, you're not alone, but be careful. There are reports of fake TNVS drivers picking up passengers and then charging them unregulated fees. According to reports online, a certain driver of a black SUV has been going around the metro to pick up passengers. While making the trip, the driver would then charge passengers with rates that are higher than the app-generated fee. The LTFRB says they have identified this individual and a show-cause order has been issued to him and the owner of the vehicle. Ride-hailing service Grab also confirmed that this SUV is not registered with them. For those wondering about the modus, one victim shares his experience.
Naka-on yung screen ng phone ko, bigla siya lumapit. Siguro, take advantage niya yung nakita niya sa phone ko na nagbubuk kami ng Grab. Feeling close siya, sir, feeling close. Tapos, bigla niyang kinancel yung booking ko. Sabi ko, sir, bakit mo kinancel yung booking ko? Sabi niya, sir, para wala na daw paltas si Grab. Para daw direct na daw lahat sa kanya kita. Kiningil po niya ako, sabi niya, pwede na bang mahingi na yung 300 niya ako, sabi 300. Sabi ko, sir, sabi ko, bakit po 300? Sabi ko, Grab rate lang po.
Authorities have arrested a former policeman wanted for the murder of publicist Bobby Dacer and his driver Emmanuel Corbito. Former cop William Reed III was arrested in Pulilan, Bulacan on Tuesday. NCRPO Director Jonel Estomo calls the arrest an extraordinary feat as Reed managed to evade authorities for about 22 years. Dacer and Corbito were abducted in November 2000 and their charred remains were found 5 months later in Indang, Cavite. Former PNP Chief and Senator Panfilo Lacson was among those accused in the case, but the Court of Appeals has since cleared him of any involvement in the crime.
After the break, we have some good news for pet owners that commute via the LRT2. Find out more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
story here on One News. The House Committee on Constitutional Amendments began its formal deliberations on proposed measures for charter change in the current 19th Congress. Marian Enriquez with the details.
With the deliberation of the pending measures.
Is it time to amend the Constitution? If so, how? These were the initial questions of members of the House Committee on Constitutional Amendments. 5 measures were filed before the lower house, pushing for a constitutional convention to make amendments in the 1987 Constitution. Delegates will be elected from every legislative district to propose amendments. For former Supreme Court Associate Justice Vicente Mendoza, there's an urgent need to amend the Constitution due to the amendment clause in Article 17 being very ambiguous. It does not state if the 2 houses of Congress must sit jointly or separately, or vote as one or not in a constituent assembly or constitutional convention.
This has been a problem since the 1987 Constitution, Mr. Chairman, and it has not been resolved. You make that ambiguous. You make it difficult for people to amend the Constitution. It lacks the details. What do you have? You might have a revolution.
Mendoza says the amendment clause is an essential part of the Constitution. But for attorney Christian Monsod, who was one of the framers of the Charter, the Constitution is not the problem.
The Constitution, Your Honors, is not the problem. It is part of the solution. Why don't you pass those first? And then let's see whether they work and won't need any change in the Constitution.
Monsod warned that if the phrase "unless otherwise provided by law" is inserted to loosen restrictive economic provisions, this will make legislators too powerful by allowing them to propose changes just by passing regular laws without the need for a vote by the Filipino people through a plebiscite.
The door is open wider to transactional legislation at which corrupt politicians and greedy business are very adept.
But for attorney Adolfo Azcuna, the economic policies should be adjustable to the needs of the country, especially since it has been 36 years since the Constitution was made.
We need foreign investment in order to recover from the twin impact of inflation and the pandemic. And yet we are constrained by economic policies that are not meant to last 36 years.
Constitutional Amendments Panel Chairman Rufus Rodriguez meanwhile said that they will visit different parts of the country to hold public consultations on the matter. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
In other news, rising cases of school violence have been reported as of late. The Alliance of Concerned Teachers in our interview this week pointed to systemic problems as the root cause. But is there another side to it? Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual with this report.
Bloody fistfights in school grounds and fatal stabbing incidents. These are just some of the cases of school violence that have been reported lately. But why is this happening? For teacher Annalina Serena, who has been an educator for 25 years now, there's been a shift in attitudes and behavior among kids these days.
Noon ay hindi ka pwede sumabat kapag may nag-uusap na mas nakatatanda, hindi ka pwede sumabat. Ngayon, pinakikinggan na ang opinyon kahit ng isang bata. Yung nakikita niya, lalo na kapag yung bata ay medyo mahina, makisabay doon sa nangyayari, madali siyang maaya doon sa masama kaysa doon sa tama.
According to teacher Annalyn, educators nowadays have to be wary of their students because some develop violent tendencies early on.
Minsan sa elementary pa lang, siguro para mga grade 3, mga ganyan pa lang, lalo na pag-uwian, makikita mo kung ano yung ginagawa, merong dadampot ng bato, magbabato siya, isang pagiging violente na rin yun ng isang bata, merong namumursonada.
Teacher Annalyn admits that getting students to follow has gotten more difficult over the years. Corporal punishment has been considered a form of discipline, especially for older generations. But now, methods of discipline involving physical or verbal abuse are becoming obsolete.
Sa na-experience ko noon na paraan ng pagdidisiplina kahit meron pa corporal punishment, naging matino, naging disiplinado, Kaya hindi natin pwedeng sabihin ibalik natin yung paraan ng pagdidisiplina noon. Ang suggestion ko para sa akin ay meron mang konting disiplina pero hindi yung papaluin. Yung hindi sila magre-rebelde.
For now, the DepEd is caught in between a series of investigations involving violence in schools. The agency seeks to review whether there are lapses in security protocols. The DepEd is also considering adding peace culture in the basic education curriculum. But while all of these efforts have yet to bear fruit, teachers are left with the task of making sure students end up right. After all, teachers are considered our second parents. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual. We are One News.
Before we go, attention for parents. Pets will now be allowed to ride LRT2 trains starting this February, provided they meet some requirements. Light Rail Transit Authority Administrator Fernando Cabrera noted that pets will only be allowed if they are fully vaccinated against rabies, placed inside a cage, and should be wearing diapers. Owners of big pets, meanwhile, should think twice before bringing them along as they might not be allowed inside the LRT2. Cabrera, however, did not specify any restrictions based on size, weight, or breed. The LRTA is set to release further guidelines as it prepares its trains and stations to be more pet-friendly.
Yung mga usual na mga alituntunin na pinapatupad ng mga pet-friendly natin na mga established, ganun din yung ating policy na i-implement. Ang objective lang naman natin dito is magigawin natin pet-friendly yung ating sistema.
Pinag-uusapan lang natin the other day when was the last time you rode the LRT train, right? This might encourage a lot of people to do that option.
I know a lot of people really very happy and really celebrating this news. They're looking forward to it. We have to congratulate the LRTA administrators. It's not yet perfect. Hindi pa not everybody happy, di ba? Because there are still, but I think it's a fantastic step forward. And yeah, gaya nga ng sabi niya, hopefully they will expand this and we'll learn some in the early days.
Paano kung magdadala ka ng ahas? Tapos rush hour. Oo, tingnan natin.
Yan ang mga hindi pa naisip. Kunin niyo pong consultant. Ahusay. And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. I'm Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
And we are One News. All sides, all the time.